You know that feeling when everyone around you seems to have given up on your dreams? When your family looks at you with pity, your friends stopped asking about your goals, and even strangers seem to question every move you make. There's something they don't understand. There's something they can't see. While they're measuring your worth by temporary circumstances, God is preparing you for permanent elevation. Right now, in this very moment, you might be surrounded by doubt. People who once cheered for you have gone silent. The voices that used to encourage you now whisper concerns. Your inbox is filled with advice about being realistic and practical. But here's what I need you to understand. Their doubt is not your destiny. Their limited vision is not your reality. God doesn't need a committee's approval to elevate you. He doesn't require a unanimous vote from your critics. He doesn't wait for permission from those who never believed in you anyway. Throughout history, the greatest elevations happened when everyone else counted people out. Joseph was elevated from prison to palace while his brothers thought he was dead. David was elevated from shepherd to king while his own family dismissed him. Moses was elevated from fugitive to deliverer while Pharaoh thought he was powerless. Every single one of them faced a season where doubt surrounded them like walls. But those walls weren't their prison. They were their preparation. And the same thing is happening in your life right now. Welcome to a message that's going to shift your perspective completely. I'm so glad you're here because what we're about to discuss isn't just motivational talk. This is biblical truth that has the power to transform how you see your current season of doubt. Before we dive deep, I want to create a community right here in the comments. I want you to drop a comment and tell me, what city are you watching from? It doesn't matter if you're in New York or Nairobi, Tokyo or Toronto. I want to know where you are because this message is reaching people all over the world who are in the exact same season you're in. They need to know they're not alone. You need to know you're not alone. So go ahead, hit that comment section and let me know your city. And while you're down there, tell me this too. What's one dream people have doubted that you're still believing God for? Because here's what I know. You didn't click on this video by accident. You're here because somewhere deep inside, your story isn't over. You know that this season of doubt is not your final chapter. You know that God has something bigger planned and you're hungry for confirmation. Well, consider this your confirmation. Today, we're going to walk through exactly why God elevates people during their most doubted seasons, how He's positioning you right now even when you can't see it, and what you need to do to stay faithful while everyone else counts you out. This isn't going to be quick or easy, but I promise you, by the end of this message, you're going to have a completely different understanding of why God allows doubt to surround you before your elevation. Let's go. Let's start with something most people never consider. Doubt from others is actually a divine indicator. I know that sounds backwards. We've been taught to fear doubt, to avoid it, to see it as a sign that we're on the wrong path. But what if I told you that the presence of doubt around you is often confirmation that you're exactly where God wants you? Think about it this way. When you're living small, when you're playing it safe, when you're operating within the limits of what people expect from you, nobody doubts you. Doubt only shows up when you start reaching for something beyond what's visible. Doubt appears when you claim promises that seem impossible. Doubt surrounds you when you declare destinations that your current position doesn't justify. The problem isn't that people doubt you. The problem is that we've been taught to interpret their doubt as evidence that we're wrong. But Scripture shows us something completely different. Every major biblical figure who experienced significant elevation had to walk through a season where they were surrounded by doubters. Abraham was doubted when he left his homeland with no GPS and no guarantee. Noah was doubted when he built an ark without a single raindrop in sight. Moses was doubted by the very people he was called to deliver. Joshua was doubted when he said the walls would fall. Gideon was doubted when he reduced his army instead of expanding it. Mary was doubted when she said she was carrying the Messiah. Paul was doubted when he said he'd seen Jesus on the road to Damascus. Do you see the pattern? Doubt isn't a detour. It's part of the path. God specifically allows you to be surrounded by doubters because it serves multiple purposes in your development. First, doubt reveals who's really with you. When everyone believes in you, you can't distinguish between genuine support and fair-weather friendship. But when doubt arrives, your true circle becomes crystal clear. The people who stay when everyone else leaves are the ones God assigned to your journey. Second, doubt develops your faith muscles. If everyone around you confirmed your vision, you wouldn't need faith. You'd be operating on consensus. But God doesn't elevate you based on group agreement. He elevates you based on your willingness to believe Him when the evidence suggests otherwise. Third, doubt creates space for God to get the glory. When your elevation makes logical sense, people credit your education, your connections, your timing, your strategy. But when your elevation happens despite widespread doubt, despite impossible odds, despite every logical reason to fail, there's only one explanation: God did it. And here's what you need to understand. God is more interested in getting glory than in making you comfortable. He will absolutely allow you to be doubted, questioned, and dismissed if it means your eventual elevation will point undeniably to Him. So when you're surrounded by doubt right now, don't panic. Don't retreat. Don't start second-guessing what God already confirmed. Instead, recognize that doubt around you is often God's way of saying, I'm about to do something so big that I need to make sure I get the credit for it. The very thing you've been fearing, the doubt that's been keeping you up at night, might actually be confirmation that you're right on schedule. Your elevation is coming. And the doubt surrounding you right now is just setting the stage for God to show up in a way that leaves no question about who made it happen. But let's get more specific about what happens during this season of doubt. Because understanding the purpose of doubt is one thing, but surviving it is another. Right now, you're not just dealing with abstract concepts. You're dealing with real conversations, real rejections, real moments where people you love and respect look at you like you've lost your mind. You're dealing with family members who used to support you but now suggest you should try something else. You're dealing with friends who stopped inviting you to things because your faith makes them uncomfortable. You're dealing with colleagues who smirk when you talk about your goals. You're dealing with that voice in your own head that whispers, maybe they're right, maybe you're fooling yourself. This is where most people quit. Not because they stop believing in the vision, but because the weight of doubt becomes too heavy to carry. They get tired of defending their dreams. They get exhausted from explaining what God showed them. They get worn down by the constant need to justify why they're still believing when nothing has changed yet. But here's what I need you to understand. The enemy's primary strategy during your pre-elevation season is isolation. He wants you to believe you're the only one who's ever felt this way. He wants you to think you're crazy for still believing. He wants you to feel stupid for holding on to promises that seem increasingly impossible. That's why he uses the people closest to you to voice the doubt. Because doubt from strangers is easy to dismiss. But doubt from your mother? Doubt from your spouse? Doubt from your best friend? That doubt feels different. It feels heavier. It feels like maybe it's truth instead of attack. But you have to recognize the source. When people who love you express doubt about your God-given vision, they're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to protect you. They're operating from their own limitations, their own fears, their own past disappointments. They're projecting their ceiling onto your calling. And you cannot allow their love to limit your obedience. This is crucial. Loving someone doesn't mean they understand your assignment. Your mother can love you deeply and still not comprehend what God called you to do. Your spouse can be committed to you completely and still not see what God showed you in private. Your best friend can be loyal to you and still think you're making a mistake. Their doubt doesn't invalidate God's promise. It just reveals that God gave the vision to you, not to them. This is actually merciful. Imagine if everyone could see what God showed you. Your vision would become a group project. Everyone would have input, suggestions, modifications, improvements. But God gave you the vision in isolation so you could execute it in obedience. He didn't show it to your family so they couldn't vote on it. He didn't reveal it to your friends so they couldn't democratize it. He gave it to you alone because your elevation is a sovereign act of God, not a community decision. So when they doubt, you have to learn to do something that feels counterintuitive. You have to thank God for the isolation. Because that isolation is protection. It's protecting your vision from being diluted by committee. It's protecting your faith from being weakened by consensus. It's protecting your obedience from being contaminated by human reasoning. Every person who has ever been elevated by God had to learn to be alone with their vision before they could be celebrated with their victory. And I'm not just talking about physical aloneness. I'm talking about the spiritual aloneness of being the only one who believes. Noah built alone. Abraham traveled alone. Moses led alone. David fought alone. Jesus prayed alone. And you're going to have to learn to stand alone. Because what's coming for you is so big, so beyond what people can comprehend, so far outside the boundaries of normal expectation, that God cannot trust your circle with it yet. They'll see it when it happens. They'll celebrate it when it manifests. They'll testify about it when it's complete. But right now, in the building phase, in the believing phase, in the trusting phase, you're going to have to carry this alone. And that's not punishment, that's preparation. Now let's talk about what God is actually doing while everyone else is doubting. Because here's what's fascinating. While people are busy questioning your decisions, God is busy positioning you for elevation. They're not mutually exclusive. In fact, they're simultaneous. Think about Joseph again. While his brothers were throwing him in a pit and selling him to slave traders, God was positioning him toward Pharaoh's palace. While Potiphar's wife was falsely accusing him and getting him thrown in prison, God was positioning him to interpret dreams for rulers. While the cupbearer forgot about him for 2 more years in that prison cell, God was positioning him for perfect timing. At every single point in Joseph's story, if you looked at the circumstances, you'd think God had abandoned him. Betrayed by family, sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned unjustly, forgotten repeatedly. But God wasn't absent. God was actively working. Every pit was preparation. Every setback was setup. Every delay was development. Every moment of doubt from others was actually a moment of development from God. And the same thing is happening in your life right now. While they're doubting your business idea, God is developing your character to handle the success that's coming. While they're questioning your decision to change careers, God is positioning you in the exact location you need to be for your next assignment. While they're criticizing your faith, God is building your testimony. While they're mocking your dreams, God is orchestrating your miracle. You have to understand that God's positioning doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like prison. Sometimes it looks like rejection. Sometimes it looks like loss. But God is a master at using what looks like setback to set you up for comeback. He specializes in turning messes into messages, tests into testimonies, and trials into triumphs. Right now, while you're reading these words, God is working on your behalf in ways you cannot see. He's having conversations about you in rooms you've never entered. He's opening doors you didn't know existed. He's moving people into position who will be crucial for your next season. He's closing doors that would have led you somewhere smaller than where he's taking you. He's protecting you from opportunities that look good but would actually delay your destiny. All of this is happening simultaneously with the doubt. The doubt doesn't stop God's work. It conceals it. Because if you could see everything God was doing, you wouldn't need faith. You'd be operating on sight. But God requires faith because faith pleases Him. And more than that, faith qualifies you for what He's preparing. See, God doesn't just elevate you to reward you. He elevates you to position you for assignment. Every elevation in Scripture came with responsibility. Joseph was elevated to save nations from famine. Moses was elevated to deliver a nation from slavery. David was elevated to establish a kingdom. Esther was elevated to save her people from genocide. God's elevation always has purpose beyond your personal blessing, and He needs to know that you can be trusted with what He's about to give you. So this season of doubt is actually your qualification process. He's watching to see if you'll believe Him when nothing in your natural circumstances confirms His promise. He's testing to see if you'll obey Him when everyone around you thinks you're making a mistake. He's observing whether you'll worship Him in the waiting or complain about the delay. This isn't cruelty, this is preparation, because what God is preparing to give you is so significant, so influential, so far beyond your current capacity, that you absolutely must be developed before you're delivered. He cannot give you the platform until He's built the character. He cannot give you the influence until He's established the integrity. He cannot give you the abundance until He's tested your stewardship. So while they doubt, stay faithful. While they question, stay focused. While they mock, stay obedient. Because every day you remain faithful in the season of doubt, you're being prepared for the season of elevation that's coming. Let's talk about timing, because this is where most people struggle. You believe God's promise. You understand the purpose of doubt. You're committed to staying faithful. But the question that haunts you is, how long do I have to be doubted? How long do I have to wait? How long until the elevation comes? And here's the honest answer. You don't get to know. I wish I could give you a timeline. I wish I could tell you that if you just hold on for 6 more months, everything will change. But that's not how God works. His timing is perfect, but it's rarely predictable. Think about Abraham. God promised him a son, but that son didn't come for 25 years. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before God called him to deliver Israel. Joseph spent 13 years between the dream and the fulfillment. David was anointed king as a teenager, but didn't take the throne until he was 30. The Israelites wandered for 40 years before entering the promised land. Jesus himself waited 30 years before beginning his public ministry. God's delays are not God's denials, but they are often longer than we expect. And there's a reason for that. Every delay serves a purpose. Sometimes God is waiting for you to be ready. Sometimes He's waiting for the situation to be ready. Sometimes He's waiting for the people who need to be in place to be ready. Sometimes He's orchestrating circumstances you can't see. Sometimes He's protecting you from an elevation you're not prepared to sustain. But here's what you need to know about God's timing. It's always right. Not early, not late. Right. And one of the ways you know God's timing is right is that it usually comes when you've been doubted the longest and when you've been tested the most. The elevation doesn't come when you're fresh and excited. It comes when you're tired and tested but still faithful. It doesn't come when everyone still believes in you. It comes when you've been doubted so long that your miracle is undeniable. It doesn't come when the path is clear. It comes when you've walked through the valley and proven you'll follow God anyway. Think about it. If Joseph had been elevated to second in command of Egypt without the pit, the slavery, the false accusation, and the prison, people would have attributed it to favoritism or family connections. But because he was elevated from the depths of prison after 13 years of being doubted and dismissed, everyone knew it was God. If David had become king immediately after Samuel anointed him, people would have said he just got lucky or that Samuel played favorites. But because he was elevated after years of running from Saul, hiding in caves, being rejected by his own people, everyone knew God had chosen him. The length of your doubt season is directly connected to the magnitude of your elevation. God allows you to be doubted long enough that when He elevates you, there's no question about who did it. And I know that's hard to hear when you're in the middle of it. I know you're tired. I know you're wondering if you heard God correctly. I know there are days you want to give up. But you cannot quit now. Not when you've come this far. Not when you've been faithful this long. Not when you're this close to seeing everything change. Because here's what I've learned. The darkest hour really is just before dawn. The most intense doubt often comes right before the breakthrough. The enemy fights hardest when he knows your elevation is imminent. So if the doubt around you has intensified, if the criticism has increased, if the pressure has multiplied, don't see it as a sign you're going the wrong direction. See it as confirmation you're getting close. The enemy doesn't waste ammunition on people who aren't a threat. He only attacks people who are about to break through. And the intensity of the attack is often proportional to the significance of what's coming. So hold on, stay faithful, keep believing, because your elevation is not just coming, it's close. Here's what you need to do practically while you're waiting for your elevation. Because faith without action is dead. And believing God's promise while sitting passively won't position you for what's coming. First, guard your peace. The doubt around you will try to steal your peace. People will ask you questions designed to make you second-guess yourself. They'll point out every obstacle, highlight every reason it won't work, and remind you of every past failure. But you cannot allow their chaos to become your crisis. You have to protect your peace like it's your most valuable possession because it is. When you lose your peace, you lose your ability to hear God clearly, and you need to hear Him clearly right now more than ever. So that means you might need to limit conversations with certain people. Not because you don't love them, but because you love your assignment more. It means you might need to stop explaining yourself to people who aren't trying to understand. It means you might need to spend more time alone with God than in rooms full of people who drain your faith. Second, stay obedient in the small things. This is crucial. While you're waiting for the big elevation, God is watching how you handle the small assignments. Are you faithful with what's in your hand right now? Are you excellent in the position you're currently in even though you know it's not where you're staying? Are you serving where you are while believing for where you're going? Because God will not elevate you to the next level until you've been faithful at the current level. Joseph was faithful as a slave before he was elevated to oversee Potiphar's house. He was faithful in prison before he was elevated to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. He was faithful in every season even when it seemed like faithfulness wasn't paying off. And that faithfulness was the evidence that he could be trusted with more. So whatever your hand finds to do right now, do it with excellence. Not because it's your dream job, but because it's your current assignment. Not because people are watching, but because God is. Third, keep building in private. Just because people doubt your vision doesn't mean you stop working on it. This is your building season. While they're talking about what you can't do, you should be doing what they say you can't. While they're questioning whether it will work, you should be working on making it undeniable. While they're waiting for you to give up, you should be stacking small wins that will eventually become your big breakthrough. Every person who was elevated by God was doing something before the elevation came. David was tending sheep and developing his skills with a sling. Moses was learning the wilderness he'd later lead people through. Paul was studying scripture he'd later teach. They weren't just sitting around waiting for God to do everything. They were stewarding their gifts, developing their skills, and preparing for what was coming even when no one else could see it. Fourth, surround yourself with the right voices. You cannot survive this season alone. You need people who believe in you even when circumstances don't support their belief. You need people who remind you of God's promises when your memory gets foggy. You need people who have been through their own seasons of doubt and came out elevated on the other side. These people might not be in your immediate circle. You might have to look outside your natural relationships to find spiritual family who understands the season you're in. But find them, connect with them, learn from them. Because isolation will kill your dream faster than doubt ever could. Fifth, document the journey. Write down what God has shown you. Record the confirmations He's given you. Keep track of the small miracles along the way. Because there will be days you forget. There will be moments you question whether you really heard from God. And in those moments, you'll need evidence to remind you that yes, God spoke, and yes, He's still faithful. This documentation also becomes your testimony later. When God elevates you and people ask how it happened, you'll have a record of His faithfulness through every season of doubt. And finally, worship anyway. This might be the most important thing. When nothing makes sense, worship. When the wait feels too long, worship. When the doubt feels too heavy, worship. When circumstances contradict the promise, worship. Because worship does something powerful. It shifts your focus from what you can see to who God is. It reminds you that He's bigger than your circumstances. It declares that you trust Him even when you can't trace Him. And more than anything else, worship positions you for breakthrough. Throughout Scripture, breakthrough came during or immediately after worship. The walls of Jericho fell while people were worshiping. Paul and Silas were freed from prison at midnight while they were singing. Jehoshaphat's enemies destroyed each other while his worshippers went before the army. Worship isn't just what you do when things are going well. It's what you do to shift the atmosphere when things aren't. So worship anyway. Even when you don't feel like it. Even when it seems like nothing's changing. Even when people think you're crazy for praising God in the midst of doubt. Worship anyway. Because your worship is a weapon against doubt, a declaration of faith, and a catalyst for your elevation. Let me end with this truth that you need to carry with you. God doesn't elevate you because you're perfect. He elevates you because you're faithful. You don't have to have it all together. You don't have to execute flawlessly. You don't have to convince everyone around you that you're worthy of elevation. You just have to stay faithful to what God told you to do. That's it. Stay faithful when it's hard. Stay faithful when you're tired. Stay faithful when you're doubted. Stay faithful when nothing makes sense. Just stay faithful. Because God is looking for people He can trust, not people who are perfect. He's looking for people who will believe Him when everyone else doubts. He's looking for people who will obey Him when it costs them something. He's looking for people who will worship Him in the waiting. And if that's you, then your elevation is guaranteed. Not because you're special, but because God is faithful. Not because you deserve it, but because He promised it. Not because circumstances support it, but because His word declares it. So I want you to hear this clearly. God is going to elevate you. Not if, not maybe, not hopefully. He is going to elevate you. Every person who doubted you will see it. Every circumstance that contradicted the promise will have to bow to it. Every delay that frustrated you will make sense when you see what God was doing. And when your elevation comes, and it will come, you're going to look back at this season of doubt and recognize it for what it really was. It wasn't your enemy. It was your preparation. It wasn't your detour. It was your development. It wasn't your punishment. It was your positioning. God was elevating you all along. You just couldn't see it yet because the elevation was happening internally before it manifested externally. He was elevating your faith, your character, your capacity, your endurance, your trust, and all of that internal elevation was necessary for the external elevation that's coming. So don't despise this season. Embrace it, learn from it, grow through it. Because when God finally elevates you publicly, you'll have the internal strength to sustain what He gives you. You'll have the character to handle the platform. You'll have the wisdom to steward the influence. You'll have the humility to give Him the glory. And that's what this was all about from the beginning. Not just elevating you so you could be blessed, but developing you so you could be trusted with blessing that serves His purpose. Your elevation is coming. God is going to lift you up when everyone else counted you out. He's going to open doors everyone said were closed. He's going to make ways where there was no way. He's going to turn your test into your testimony. And when He does, everyone who doubted you is going to see that it was God all along. They're going to recognize that what they called impossible, God called inevitable. What they called crazy, God called faith. What they called failure, God called preparation. Hold on, stay faithful, keep believing, because your season of doubt is about to become your season of elevation. And God is going to do it in a way that leaves no doubt about who made it happen.